Knowing how something actually works is a superpower. It means you can tell when people are conning you. It makes you less vulnerable to having your stuff stolen in hacks. And it means you can see around the corners and predict the future. And sometimes it even means you can build that future yourself. One of the first things I did when getting into NFTs was reading this book. You probably should too. This whole book? I don't have time for this. Well, yes, you should. But in the meantime, keep watching for a quick, easy to understand explanation of how NFTs actually work, so you know exactly what's happening under the hood and no one can just take you for a ride. Hi everyone. My name is Daniel Tenner, aka Swombat, and in these videos I use my 15 years of experience as a successful entrepreneur working with hundreds of tech startup founders to bring clarity to Web3 and NFTs. Also, this video is sponsored by Zen Academy, which is Zenika's community where he's trying to bring together good people from all around the world to learn and succeed together. There's no exchange of money, but we get along well and we're both trying to help people understand NFTs better, so we decided, why not talk about each other more? Before I can explain how NFTs work, I need to lay out how regular fungible tokens work. Fungible tokens are things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and Polygon. Now, fungible simply means that the tokens are exchangeable for each other. One Bitcoin is the same as another Bitcoin. The same is true for all currencies. $1 is the same as another dollar. So fundamentally, what blockchains are is just distributed ledgers, which keep track of how much of the currency each account is holding and record transactions between those accounts. This is very similar to how your bank works. They keep track of your money and of any transfers you make. The difference is, your bank can choose to freeze or confiscate your money for whatever reason they dream of, and the government can tell them to do that. With distributed ledgers, they can't do that because the ledger is running on tens of thousands of computers all around the world, and most of those would need to be convinced to participate in that seizure for it to work. That's a big reason why people with libertarian tendencies or who live under oppressive governments find crypto essential. Each account or address is linked to a private key or seed phrase that you need to keep secret. The only way to authorize a transaction that moves funds out of your account is with that private key. Here's an important concept. When you have $100 in your bank account, that doesn't mean there are $100 bills sitting in a bank vault with your name on them. The $100 doesn't actually exist, except as an entry in the bank's ledger. What you really have is an authentication method, like a debit card, that allows you to tell the bank's ledger to move that $100 somewhere else. The same is true with crypto. The Bitcoin or Ethereum doesn't really exist outside of the ledger. Your wallet, which is basically your private key, is like your debit card, which you can use to tell the ledger to move those funds elsewhere. Keep that in mind as we start to look at NFTs. If fungible tokens are exchangeable for each other, non-fungible ones are basically not. For example, my cats are not fungible with each other or with any other cat. They are each unique. The same is true for almost everything we own. Fungible things are actually the exception. All your possessions, everything around you is non-fungible. Fungibility is something we made up. So truly, non-fungible tokens should just be called tokens. Like fungible tokens, NFTs don't actually exist in the way that a pound coin or a dollar bill might. They're just an entry in a database somewhere. When you kill a monster in World of Warcraft and pick up a sword, it also doesn't really exist, but Blizzard maintains a database that says you own the sword and what kind of sword it is. This is all handled by code on Blizzard's computers. With Ethereum NFTs, this is all done by something called a smart contract. Back when Bitcoin ruled supreme, some bright programmers came to the conclusion that a ledger is basically a kind of computer, just a really dumb one. So they decided to make a smarter version of Bitcoin that would be able to execute any program, not just transactions that move tokens from A to B. That's what smart contracts are. Arbitrary executable programs that run on the blockchain, distributed across tens of thousands of computers using the same consensus protocols like proof of work or proof of stake. Some of these programs follow a protocol called ERC-721, which basically sets up a tiny database to track ownership of specific tokens in that contract. That's how the blockchain knows who owns what token. Much like with fungible tokens, the token doesn't really exist. It's just a line in a database, and it's not in your wallet any more than the $100 in your bank account is. The wallet is just a method by which you can tell the smart contract on the blockchain to move your token somewhere else. If you want to dive much deeper into how NFTs work, I'm afraid the next step is to read this book and to get a better grasp of how it all works on a fundamental technical level. This might seem like a very complicated way to go about it. Why do we need blockchains to track who owns what token? The reason is pretty fundamental. In a way, we've had NFTs for decades. Online games have kept track of who owns what, social media sites have tracked profiles and personal data attached to it, software as a service sites keep track of the things you've built on them, like Trello boards or chat groups. But because those tokens were all locked up inside private company databases, they were of very limited use. They could only be used for exactly what the company that created them could imagine and build. NFTs are interoperable, which means they can inherently be used anywhere that accepts them. So if it was an NFT, I could take my World of Warcraft sword and use it in a different game if they chose to accept it. Also, I could display it in a gallery to show it off if it was a particularly nice sword, and many other uses. This global record of who owns what online could, in theory, have been created by a company or a government. But the question is, which one would you trust with that power? Facebook, who consistently lie and abuse their power over people's personal data? Microsoft, with their history of abusing their position to extinguish competitors? Google, who recently dropped their "Don't be evil" motto, which is rather disturbing? Or maybe a government? How about the US or the UK? Both of which have been shown by the Snowden revelations to be spying on their own citizens, already way beyond the bounds that lawmakers set for them. Or perhaps you'd rather it was China or India or Russia. No single entity can be trusted with this power, which is why NFTs have only taken off now that we have a decentralized blockchain to store them on. Now that they're here though, they're going to change the world. And if you'd like to know how that will happen, check out this video I made earlier, which goes into 10 future use cases of NFTs that might not be obvious right now. GM and good.